From the Grayman Briefing, this is a summary of recent developments regarding the Second Amendment, cybersecurity, protests, supply chain disruptions, national security, law and order, free speech, censorship, government oversight, and more. Now, the latest from GraymanBriefing.com. Here's this week's Sword, read out by Super Essie.
And here's what we're monitoring for this week. Special Counsel Jack Smith, he's dismissed those charges against Trump. The president-elect has proposed a 25% tariff on Mexican and Canadian imports to address illegal immigration and drugs. Global conflict tensions increase as Russia launches a new IRBM with a nuclear-capable payload. Cybersecurity issues emerged with undersea cable sabotage and Chinese hacks on U.S. telecom networks. Arrests were made in a New York Stock Exchange bomb plot, while civil unrest developments see protests in D.C., neo-Nazi marches in Ohio, and widespread Antifa, LGBT, and pro-Palestinian riots across the nation. Sweden, Finland, and Norway have issued crisis preparedness materials as global tensions rise and NATO warns of World War III. Let's get started with government oversight. As we said at first, Special Counsel Jack Smith filed a motion to dismiss January 6 charges against the former president, following setbacks in other cases, including the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case and the delayed New York hush money trial case. President-elect Trump announced plans for a 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada to address illegal immigration and drug smuggling. He stated the tariff would remain until both nations take effective action. It looks like Canada is pretty much willing to work with him. However, Mexico said they may issue tariffs as kind of a revenge move. Let's move into global conflict. On November 25th, NATO's military committee chair urged businesses to prepare for wartime scenarios. He highlighted Europe's reliance on Russian energy and Chinese goods as strategic vulnerabilities and called for an industrial shift to support potential conflicts. So the NATO chair, the admiral there, he basically issued warnings to the business sector, the commercial sector, especially those who make ammunition for both private and for military purposes. Russian President Putin convened a Security Council meeting to address NATO policies and escalating U.S. military presence. Putin emphasized Russia's hypersonic missile capabilities, claiming these weapons could bypass American defenses. He said there's nothing out there that can stop his Mach 10 missile, his IRBM. Sweden issued an update. So basically, this is an update to their In Case of Crisis or War pamphlet. This update was sent out to its citizens, advising preparation for potential conflicts. Finland and Norway have also provided similar crisis preparedness guidance. All right, we're going to kind of go into detail here on this one. On November 21st, Russia appears to have launched an intermediate range ballistic missile. This is an IRBM with a range of up to 3,415 miles. Initially, Ukraine and OSINT journalists suggested the weapon used was an intercontinental ballistic missile, or an ICBM. The missile appears to have targeted a central eastern section of Ukraine. It was launched from a kind of a Russian region about 430 miles away. Russia also fired a Kinzhal hypersonic missile and 7 Kh-101 cruise missiles. The IRBM appears to have been equipped with a multiple interdependently targeted re-entry vehicle, or the MIRV, as a payload associated with nuclear-capable missiles. This marks a stark escalation in the conflict and comes after increased NATO and U.S. support for Ukraine, specifically the Biden administration's approval of ATACMS use within Russia and landmines. U.S. officials were reportedly alerted by Russia just prior to the launch of the IRBM in order to de-escalate nuclear tensions. We're currently at the climax of this conflict, as both the current U.S. administration and Russia are utilizing the months prior to Trump's inauguration to escalate and achieve their independent desired goals. Make sure you monitor these developments closely, as increased U.S. support signals heightened threats to the U.S. populace and critical infrastructure, specifically our communications infrastructure. And speaking of, let's shift into cybersecurity and infrastructure. Undersea internet cables connecting Finland and Germany and Lithuania and Sweden were severed. I believe it was on the 18th and 19th of November. Officials suspect sabotage likely by Russia, highlighting vulnerabilities in global communication infrastructures. The NATO-related undersea cable disruptions are under investigation with sabotage, like I said, likely targeting this critical infrastructure and increasing global tensions. The FBI issued warnings about potential attacks on U.S. critical infrastructure following heightened geopolitical tensions with Russia and China. Chinese hackers infiltrated the U.S. telecom networks, including AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon. They accessed government-linked communication data. The Library of Congress confirmed a breach compromised their communications between staff and congressional offices with foreign adversaries suspected. Let's shift now into national security. In Florida, a man, Haran Abdul Malik Yunur, was arrested for plotting to bomb the New York Stock Exchange. The FBI found bomb-making materials and extremist notes claiming an attack could reboot the U.S. government. Russian President Putin convened a meeting of the Russian Security Council to address the situation in Ukraine and broader geopolitical issues, including relations with NATO and the U.S. Putin emphasized Russia's commitment to counteracting what he described as external pressures from Western nations, particularly U.S. policies, which he claimed undermine Russian security interests. The meeting included discussions on strategies to respond to U.S. military and diplomatic actions in the region while maintaining a focus on Russia's sovereignty and their national security. Putin claimed that Russia's new weapon system delivers missiles traveling at Mach 10 speeds, that, quote, missile defense systems being created by the Americans cannot intercept such missiles, end quote. He further claimed, quote, the United States made a mistake by unilaterally destroying the INF Treaty, end quote. In a separate statement, Putin said, quote, we consider ourselves in the right to use our weapons against the military facilities of those countries who allowed the use of their weapons against our facilities, and in case of escalation of aggressive action, we will respond decisively in a tit-for-tat matter. It is the U.S. that destroyed the system of international security, and by continuing to clutch to their hegemony, they are pushing the whole world into global conflict, end quote. Let's shift now into civil unrest. In Washington, D.C., climate activists, including Extinction Rebellion and Shut Down D.C., staged protests for maximum, this is what they're calling maximum climate wins before Trump's inauguration. Separate rallies opposed Trump's climate policies. In Columbus, Ohio, a neo-Nazi group marched through the short north area displaying swastika flags and shouting racist slogans. The demonstration aimed to incite hate and attract attention. There's a lot on this one. I'm seeing posts about people saying one of the rally goers dropped his FBI badge. Obviously, anytime we see these Nazis, it's hard to believe these people still exist. And a lot of times we assume, just like with not the Proud Boys, but what's their name? The Patriot Front. We always like to assume they're FBI or something. So there's no proof of any of this stuff here. All we know is people who dressed as Nazis and kind of acted like Nazis, and part of that, the whole white supremacy thing going on there in Ohio. And there was really only 13 or so people there. Moving over to Oregon and St. Helens, protests erupted after school officials failed to report multiple sexual abuse allegations against teachers. Schools were closed as parents demanded accountability. I think it was like a dozen or so cases where teachers in Oregon sexually assaulted their children, their students. And when it would be reported, it was never reported to law enforcement. It was all kept internal. Nationwide, pro-Palestinian riots and protests continued. Demonstrators clashed with police, vandalized property, and held rallies demanding an end to U.S. support for Israel. In Canada, anti-NATO and pro-Palestinian activists rioted in Montreal, leading to widespread vandalism and assaults. Protesters targeted businesses and vehicles, causing significant damage. Violent rhetoric by LGBT extremists increased online with threats aimed at countering fears of policy changes under Trump's presidency. The 4B movement, advocating against traditional gender roles, held protests nationwide opposing Trump's election. Originating in South Korea, the movement is gaining traction in the U.S. now. Pro-Palestinian activists were arrested in the Senate office building in D.C. after chanting anti-Israel slogans and hanging banners across multiple floors. There's more, but we're not going to be able to cover it all here in this podcast. All of this stuff is just things that us here at Super SE are kind of summarizing from the weekly briefing sent out. If you want more, like I'm talking sources, videos, the full analysis on these briefings I'm giving you, head to graymanbriefing.com. That's Gray with an A. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening, as always. Remain aware, be vigilant, and stay safe.
Get unredacted, real-time briefings sent via email and through the Telegram and Signal apps by joining the Grayman Briefing.